Hi, my name's Colin Ware from BNY Mellon, and thanks for everyone attending this session. I work in our tax and regulatory business solutions team, and today I want to run through really one of our main regulatory solutions ideas around horizon scanning and how we can help people to understand and find out more about regulations in terms of both upcoming regulations, but what they also mean to us in terms of impacts and the impact assessments around them. So welcome any questions as we go through the session. So please, by all means, do send in your questions as we go through, and be happy to take those during the session as well. And obviously there'll be some time at the end as well. Okay, so really just wanted to kick off a bit more really just in terms of how we're beginning to look at these type of challenges in terms of regulations and developing solutions that can help our clients. Very much within BNY Mellon, we're very much looking at the digital and how we can digitize our solutions, very much in terms of both transforming our own company, but also helping our clients, and that really is at the forefront of everything we do in terms of our digital revolution. So we want to look at how digital and the solutions around it can both be embedded within the client experience, but we also want to see how we can use cutting edge technology, and obviously something around regulation as well. We very much look across the RegTech market to understand what solutions there are out there that we can bolt on both to our own internal systems, but also are there ways that we can partner as well with some of those solutions to, again, very much open up the digital world much more and make sure that all of our knowledge, our experience and our data is very much more open now to help clients and understand just how much we can help them around regulation. So very much the digital and the digital strategy is driving lots of our thoughts and lots of our methodology around understanding regulation. I think everyone within the financial services industry obviously is now very much living with regulations. It's been that way very much since the 2008 financial crash. And I think if anything else that the current pandemic has probably shown us as well is that absolutely those regulations have helped to really restructure the whole fabric and the framework of the financial services industry, and has made it much more robust and has made it much more of a manageable and more efficient operating market. Because very much I think regulation has helped everyone to understand just exactly how we should be able to operate in whatever is thrown at us in terms of economic upheaval, or in this case obviously in something that's outside of that control, but still has an absolutely massive impact on everyone and everyone's business as well. So just worth highlighting these figures here, and they've probably gone up even more now since the coronavirus, is that literally every 7 minutes, and I think that's got even more in the last survey, there is a new regulatory update issued. So that is an awful lot of updates that all of us are having to try and keep abreast of, just to understand what's in scope and what do we actually need to be aware of, and what can we actually ignore. So that very much concentrates a lot of minds, obviously concentrates a lot of efforts as well. So as you can see there, about 25% of total operating spend goes to maintaining a compliance around all those regulations. And absolutely that figure probably went up to closer to 40%, I think, in terms of exactly just during the coronavirus, how much we needed to put into effort and resources, and really taking away, I guess, from every company, people that it's maybe not their it's not their core business, but it's actually something that absolutely necessarily needs to be done. So as you can see there as well, very much it's about 1 year is the average time for these notices to take effect as well. So that's a long period, I guess, for basically those regulatory updates to be kind of scanned and be made aware of as well. But it also just shows you the gestation period around regulations as well. That again means that we all have to be much more aware of what's going on around us, and we can't afford to just ignore that kind of information. So if we take you through to a bit more about what is actually, what some of our regulations are about. So when we first started looking at how we could help our clients with regulation, we certainly looked at the RegTech market, but also just trying to understand what really is behind the drivers around RegTech, but also what really needs to happen when regulations do come into impact. Obviously, everyone needs to comply with those regulations, but also there's a lot more now around being able to report on the regulations as well and demonstrate how you've complied as well. So there's absolutely much more of an increasing need to know what those regulatory changes are and how they might impact us, and not just the industry as a whole, but obviously each of our individual business models as well. And how can we best try to understand very much what do we actually need to really focus on, and what can we actually say, well, actually this won't impact me in terms of my own business. And that's a very, very difficult process to do indeed, and it also sucks into a lot of our resources. It takes a lot of expertise and experience and knowledge of the business as well to really try and understand exactly what a regulation means to any company and what those impacts are, because obviously it's vital to be able to do that. So what we've kind of focused on two main areas that we believe are the something that can definitely need to be addressed in order for us to help with horizon scanning and understanding what regulations mean to our clients. So that's definitely the idea about monitoring those regulations. So that's very much, how do you bring in the data? How do you track all of those? As we've said, all of those different updates, seven every minute. How do and they're very complex as well, and there's very unstructured data. So how do we keep a track of all of those different regulatory updates? They might be white papers, they might be discussion papers. How do we best keep some kind of track around it and try to almost filter out which ones are important to us and which ones aren't? So that's very much categorizing and trying to prioritize those regulatory changes based on, obviously, the data that we've actually consumed. And then after that, you need to be able to measure that. You need to be able to measure what that regulatory article means to you. So you need to assess the impact. What does it actually mean to us as a business? Which of our products are involved? Which are our services? Which teams? Which systems? And it's very much a cross-organizational view. So again, that's something that, absolutely what we don't want to have to happen is that everyone gets involved until they've almost ruled themselves out of scope. So how can we help people to understand, actually, this is the different areas that you do need to be focusing on for a particular regulation, and you can ignore maybe some other areas because they're just not going to be impacted. But that whole process, again, can take a lot of time and a lot of cost around that as well, in terms of resources and consultancies and legal opinion and the such like. So to address these challenges, basically, we've lots of firms, to be perfectly frank, employ very unscalable. As I said before, it really does take a lot of effort and a lot of resources into understanding, well, what exactly does that regulation mean, which is it's a huge drain on resources. It's a huge, very inefficient process. And 9 times out of 10, and very much from speaking to people within the market, this is a very manual research based. There is very little automation around it. There certainly is real sort of targeted messaging to stakeholders. So stakeholders quite often will be maybe bombarded with lots of different regulatory updates, and they've still got to make some kind of judgment call as to whether they need to be aware of that particular regulation and what do they need to do around it. And it usually sucks in as well a lot of different legal opinion, consultant opinion as well, because everyone's trying to really just interpret that regulation. It's not always that immediately obvious in terms of what it means to your business. And that whole process is incredibly manual and does take a lot of iteration. It does take a lot of time spent speaking to senior management teams as well. So what we've been sort of thinking about in terms of a much more scalable approach in the future state is how you can actually streamline that whole process. So obviously, as I said before, how can you consume those regulations in a much more ordered and automated fashion? How can you then understand the regulations and assess their impact? Can you then enable through machine learning, some robotics as well, can you enable the ability to actually then focus alerts straight to the actual teams and the actual systems that will be impacted by these particular regulations? So is there a way of us almost looking at and analysing the data that we might already hold on a client, or something that is already out there in terms of market data, economic data, that you can then actually say, well, actually this regulation will definitely go to these different roles, and at least then you can expect some fairly educated and some fairly cogent responses as well, and you're sending it to the right people as well. Then it's not being sent to in more of a scattergun approach, if you like, in terms of we're going to send it to everyone and let's see who responds. So very much, we've thought around that as well, and very much some of the feedback that we've had is absolutely BNY Mellon, of course, is very much one of the leading global custodians, one of the leading financial services companies in the world. And we do have lots of already internal expertise around looking at regulation. So obviously massively important for us as a company to make sure that we are compliant with regulations. So how is it, can we actually utilize some of that skills and experience and thought leadership to actually help our clients as well? And then obviously massively important as well, making sure that there's a single portal for all of this information. So rather than maybe a long email chain, or people having to use spreadsheets, or people just having to track those regulatory changes through a variety of different tools, is there a way that you can put that into one single portal and then be able to both summarize and also cascade throughout your organization, but also have the right level of detail that you can talk very intelligently to your senior managers to let them know exactly how big or how small indeed that project might be around this regulation. So those are some of the thoughts that we've had around what the future state would look like. Absolutely, in talking around that, and absolutely as we were saying before, is that all the stakeholders need to understand these emerging regulations. Everyone needs to be aware of what's coming up if they are going to be impacted. And that's the very important point, I guess, is making sure that really the teams that need to be impacted are told about these regulations, but the ones that maybe aren't impacted don't get the same information and then still have to make the same considered opinion. So obviously those stakeholders very key, obviously around legal and compliance that might be actually giving their opinion around the regulation when it first comes in, finance and risk in terms of what does that regulation mean to us as a company, for example, and then obviously your operations and technology teams that very much may need to do some kind of regulatory change to actually make sure that a company complies with that regulation. And then obviously very key as well as to what lines of business does it really impact? Is it every line of business, or is it only one specifically targeted by that particular regulation? So our thinking around that, in summary, is we want to look at developing tools, obviously, as we said before, to help our clients address and prepare for this regulatory change. We do see, there are lots of potential solutions in the market, but I think understanding that front to back process from literally from when the regulation first comes into an organisation to actually then assessing the impact, making decisions about what type of project, what type of program needs to be stood up, and then obviously as well understanding exactly what needs to happen out the back of the regulation in terms of reporting and in terms of demonstrating compliance is absolutely key, really, to where we think the tools that can actually help organisations. So some of our thoughts, and we're definitely still in the stage of going through sort of product development, if you like, is absolutely looking at horizon scanning tools to help clients, as I said before, monitor those regulatory news, look at alerts, regulatory updates on emerging issues, also access to lots of the other regulatory news that might, just be coming along. Literally, there is all, as we've said before, regulatory news comes from lots of different sources, lots of different data vendors, and lots of different data sources as well. So how can you make sense of that? So monitoring that, and then hopefully being able to give some sort of access through into some expertise that we have within our own world could also help to monitor that whole regulatory news and try and make sense of what's important and what isn't important. And then from there, we also believe very, very crucially in terms of horizon scanning, is actually around the business impact scoring. So how can you actually utilize some of the new digital technologies to help us understand, what type of impact is going to be to the business, what is going to be the cost around that, and also what is going to be the time to implementation as well. Because again, not every program is going to be the same. There may be different facets around that program as well, but actually understanding the impact is very crucial in terms of things like capital planning and budgets, and understanding just exactly what maybe our technology and operations teams will need to look at over the coming years. And also very much around business impact scoring as well is understanding if there are regulations, if you like, that absolutely could maybe be handled in the same way. Maybe there's a more strategic methodology around regulatory change, rather than maybe some of the previous kind of more tactical solutions of each time a regulation comes along, we try to address that one issue from the regulation. So that's really where we're going, and hopefully over the coming months we'll be coming out more and more with as we develop some product ideas around it, and obviously welcome very much questions and feedback from yourselves, and anyone of course who has thoughts and ideas around it. Please do reach out to me myself as well. Thank you very much, and I'll open that up for some questions now. Any questions from the audience? I can see one that's come in here as well. So that's from Luke Kenworthy. Are there particular regulations that that this will really be addressed to? That's a very good question, Luke. And I think really in reality, this should be able to fit, and any ideas that we do have around it and any product development should be able to fit any regulation. And I think that's really kind of some of our thoughts around it is actually, it's globally regulations impact everyone. Some regulatory methodology and some institutions are maybe more mature than others, but absolutely both, in EMEA and the US and in Asia Pac and whichever region, regulations will impact us. And sometimes it's actually even harder. It's the smaller regulations, or maybe some individual countries where, as a global company, you may still be impacted by that particular regulation. So absolutely, this will definitely look at any regulation across the globe, and that is certainly a goal of ours, if you like, or an objective. Got another question here as well. So how can regulatory organisations do a better job to support the financial industry? Again, very good question. I think our thoughts around this is very much, obviously, as I said before, regulations have been a massive good for the financial services industry. But I think in looking at seeing how you could utilise, digital strategies and digital methodologies around that, I think very much if regulations could be written maybe in some more standardised formats, some more structured data, then that will definitely benefit the industry as a whole and benefit solutions and make everything much maybe more efficient, more straightforward, to be able to sort of automate some of those decisions through your organisation as well. So if I'm going to say there's anything that could really help, I think it's how the actual regulations may be presented, and is there a way of actually making some of that regulatory text a bit more structured data, and something that machine learning can actually look at, and digital tools could actually utilise. Okay, that's great. I think we're just about coming up to the end of the session. So thank you very much for everyone's time and attention, and I really do appreciate everyone's thoughts afterwards. And as I said before, please do provide feedback and come back to me if you have any further thoughts and ideas. Thank you very much.